Oh, hello there. Yes, well, good morning, and another Windows update, another Windows camera not working. Yes, love it. Thanks, Bill. Today is the publication of the CAS report, so the press will be full of that, and no doubt our glorious social media-based news channels, use the term loosely in terms of channel, obviously, will be reporting on this. So we can expect to see lots of experts telling us all about how it should be, particularly from Sex Matters. Yes, indeed. So I'll have a close look at that today and no doubt talk about that tomorrow more. But we'll undoubtedly see quite a lot of Helen Joyce on our screen. She popped up yesterday on Talk TV to talk about what schools need to do. She's not a teacher, she's not an expert. Yesterday I was vastly amused because an Australian judge, where she was supposed to be giving evidence, said that they were going to reject her as a witness because they had no special qualities to offer whatsoever. As the judge put it, they could just be somebody walking off the street. Yes, and she is. She has no particular qualifications in the field. She is self-appointed, and of course whenever Talk TV, GB News and the rest of them want to go to somebody who will bring out their right-wing spiel about what is required, in other words, ban everything, then she crops up, and undoubtedly she'll be all over the media today. Not an expert, just someone who's walked off the street, as a legal view might put it. Yes, yesterday she was talking to Kevin on Talk TV, and Kevin was basically being very indignant because obviously what teachers need to do is basically shake children and say to them they're being foolish and they mustn't do anything, because apparently that will work, like it does with everything else, because again Kevin undoubtedly is an expert. But it did lead me to believe about just all of these people who are very much self-appointed. I mean, I do this as a small hobby. I have my own particular area of expertise, which I think is valid in terms of what I've been doing for the last 20 years in my job. I'm pretty well read, and as a teacher I know quite a bit about a variety of different things. Everything else is just an opinion, basically. But of course, we end up with these people in front of us, and lords and masters that must know better than us, and they are simply self-appointed types, and it is often farcical just how appalling they are. I was reminded of just a few days ago, Reform, when Hope Not Hate had pointed out what an appalling candidate they'd stood up in Lewis, and the guy from there was jumping up and down about how dreadful it was. Stan Voice of Wales, you can look up his stuff on Twitter if you fancy, but how appalling it was that he'd been dropped and how undemocratic and blah 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 blah. Yeah, whatever. But if you take just a cursory look at his Twitter feed, you can see exactly why they dropped him. But the question still remains, how on earth is it that in this day and age people are not vetted simply on something like their Twitter feed or their Facebook feed? For God's sake. Yeah, I mean, we all know that the company running Reform, have had, their fingers burnt before in elections. Think about all of that stuff about the nutters in UKIP before 2016. You would have thought they'd just simply make that part of their selection process, but apparently not. It's just basically fine. We don't mind if we pick up some racists. We're just going to feel embarrassed when it gets pointed out. And speaking of non-experts, of course, we have the ongoing inevitable things from James Esses, a man who is qualified in nothing, and yet, once again, crops up on our screens telling us like it is, the expert that he is in, well, I don't know what, in not being allowed to work with children, basically. I mean, this is from January. He was complaining about the BBC not putting on the type of news that he wants to see. Yes, James, you're not a journalist. Most of the stuff that you're interested in isn't newsworthy. It's simply you disliking people. All right? That isn't headline news, and I don't know how much of a narcissist you have to be to believe that. Then there's that whole cabal centred around Calvin Robinson, we'll come back to him, and Loza Fox, and indeed Carl Benjamin. Undoubtedly they'll invite each other on their shows to talk to each other. Carl Benjamin, a man who will often tell us about ancient British history and the Magna Carta and the rights of the people. And yeah, here we go. Right, okay, let's look at this, right? What does a right mean if we just make them up? It surely means a preference. It does not affect scarcity, labour or distribution. The positive concept of rights is obviously nonsense. Yes, indeed, Carl. You're almost there, except you don't really understand them like a lot of people don't. You can have positive rights and you can have negative rights, you know. I'm personally vastly in favour of negative rights. I like not being tortured. That's a negative one, all right? Okay, that's something that shouldn't happen to me, okay? Starvation is another one. And the fact that Carl can't get his head around the fact that we need to give people rights to food is just astounding to me, that anybody can think about. For example, I mean, you go back again to 1215 and Runnymede. Lots of the stuff that was signed there with the king was about the provision of the commons. Carl doesn't know that. He has no concept of these things whatsoever, and yet he'll sit there in the armchair telling us about all those ancient things that happened in 1702. Farcical. And yeah, from the same crew, we end up with Calvin Robinson, a man who just has, now that the mask is off, has the most appalling sort of Witchfinder General vibe about him. Here we go from about 2 weeks ago, I think it was. God is our patriarch. God is the archetype of the patriarchy. God's kingdom is a patriarchy. God revealed himself through the patriarchy. Liberalism, feminism is the work of the enemy. Smash the patriarchy are the words of Satan. Yeah, there you go, women. You need to know your place. Otherwise, it's the devil talking through you. We all know them women. Look at Adam, look at Eve, look at what Eve did. Look at what Eve did, poor old Calvin. It's no wonder he's unhappy with you lot. And here he is, yeah, being presented as somehow this bulwark of Western values against Muslims. I'll pass on that, mate, if you don't mind. Right? Speaking of religion, we get Patrick Christie's, again, from a couple of weeks ago, basically, just over a week ago. Coming up tonight on Patrick Christie's, Patrick is asking, as the Lord's Prayer is read in Urdu, should the Church of England stop pandering to other cultures? Think about that, just very briefly, okay? So now, I know the audience is there, but really, we're going to be presented with this notion that Christianity speaks English, right? That's it. Yeah, that's the word of God, right? Okay, God, as everyone knows, is a Yorkshireman, and we all know that Jesus, because we've all seen, that stuff from the 1970s, was this blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy who looked suspiciously like British actors, that spoke English, yeah. Because that was the language they spoke back then. It was English, and then it was translated into Latin, and then it got translated back into the proper English to make the King James Bible, yeah? Yeah, King James, luckily, was around then. He was able to write everything down back in the year 0. No, it's 1, wasn't it? Yeah. And utter meaningless rubbish, which is platformed. Ollie London. Right? Ollie London, for God's sake, who manages, I don't know how, to just crop up everywhere on my Twitter feed. All these people that repost stuff from him as though it's somehow anything that anybody could possibly care about, right? Ollie London on the news that Greta Thunberg has been arrested. Get a job, Greta. Yes, I think Ollie, she should get a job. It would be very sensible, wouldn't it? Because, why exactly, Ollie? Should she get a job? Do people need to have jobs, Ollie? Is that it? Should these people not be put in front of us as people we should listen to? Yeah? And finally, the last one is the news yesterday that Douglas Murray has been honoured by the state of Israel for services to allegedly anti-Semitism. I can think of so many other words to put around that. I mean, one of the guys presenting him with a medal follows Ollie London and reposts him. You just can't make this stuff up. Yeah. He's the Minister of Overseas Dysphoria. Yeah, the dysphoria in Jewish terms, and he reposts all of those wise and sage words from Ollie London. These people are supposedly our betters, and they will tell you what to think. Jeez. Anyway, I'll be looking at CAS today. I have a feeling that one of my young people won't manage to make my lesson today, which is a bit of a shame. I hope he's going to be okay. Anyway, do have a lovely one if you can do. As the sun slowly rises in the east. Don't know. It might be a reasonable day today.